I pressed play, and 200 people watched as my wife kissed her boss inside a hotel room that was supposed to be ours for our anniversary. That moment didn't happen by accident. It was the result of weeks of patience, anger bottled up so tightly it could cut through steel, and a plan so carefully designed that no one saw it coming. Not even her. Before I go further, if you love stories like this, real, raw, and sometimes a little shocking, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because trust me, this story only gets darker before the light shows up. Let me take you back to the start. My name's Anthony. I'm 36, and I work as a system administrator in a quiet Pennsylvania town. Most people think of me as the computer guy, quiet, calm, and probably boring to anyone outside of IT. And honestly, I was fine with that. I've never been the loudest person in the room, never the one making speeches or demanding attention. But I notice things. I listen. And when I get pushed too far, I remember everything. My wife, Claire, was the opposite. Ambitious, stylish, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. She worked at a prestigious consulting firm in Philadelphia, full of corporate events, late nights with clients, and expensive clothes I couldn't always explain. I thought it was just her world, the big city life brushing against our small-town marriage. I wanted to believe that. The first crack showed on a Sunday morning. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for a phone charger. Her bag was on the couch, half open. Inside, I saw something that didn't belong in our life. A delicate box with expensive lingerie, the kind that didn't fit her usual style. Next to it, a hotel key card. Riverstone Plaza. I'd never even been inside that place. It was the kind of hotel you booked to impress someone. My hands went cold. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt before. But instead of shouting or confronting her, I zipped the bag closed and said nothing. See, most people think revenge starts with rage, but for me, it started with silence. That silence became my greatest weapon. I knew if I moved too fast, I'd look crazy, or worse, give her the chance to hide her tracks. So I waited. I let her think I was the same quiet husband, the man who would never notice. And in that waiting, I built my plan. Claire had no idea who she was married to. She saw me as predictable, safe, maybe even weak. What she didn't realize is that patience and observation, my everyday survival tools, were about to destroy her carefully built double life that I started small. Paying attention to her routines, the lies she told casually, the late nights that suddenly made sense. She thought she was being clever, but when you live with someone long enough, the little details scream louder than the big ones. The way she guarded her laptop, the way she turned her phone face down whenever it buzzed, the sudden, urgent trips to the city that didn't line up with her calendar. Every new detail fed the fire inside me. And yet, on the surface, I was the same Anthony. I kissed her goodbye before work. I made dinner when she came home late. I listened when she complained about her exhausting clients. Inside, though, I was already building the foundation for what would become the most devastating night of her life. Because here's the truth. Cheating hurts. But what really cut me wasn't the physical act. It was the way she laughed with him in her messages, the way she described me as boring, invisible, a man she could step over like a shadow. That's what I couldn't forgive. Not the betrayal of our marriage, but the way she erased my dignity like I didn't matter. And so, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg her to explain. I was going to wait, collect every piece of truth, and then show the world who she really was. That I didn't need violence. I didn't need chaos. All I needed was the truth, displayed at the right time, in the right place, in front of the right audience. And the moment I found that hotel key card, I knew exactly where it was all going to end. After that morning with the hotel key card, I realized something. Claire didn't just betray me, she underestimated me. And that was her biggest mistake. See, I work in IT. My whole job is based on solving problems quietly, keeping systems running while no one notices. People think it's boring, but in reality, it teaches you how to track patterns, how to find the one broken piece in a sea of noise. And that same skill set, those quiet eyes and patient hands, were about to become my weapons that I didn't rush. I didn't confront. Instead, I became invisible in my own home. While Claire strutted around, slipping into her expensive heels and leaving for client dinners, I nodded, kissed her cheek, and went back to my desk. She thought I was the same passive Anthony. In truth, Every night, I was connecting dots, lining up proof, and preparing to shatter her mask. The first thing I noticed was her laptop. She guarded it like it held state secrets. Whenever she left the room, she closed it instantly, sometimes even clutching it under her arm like a purse. That told me everything I needed to know. Her lies were digital. And in my world, digital lies don't last forever. That I found small openings. I didn't hack or break anything. That's illegal and messy. Instead, I waited for the moments she slipped. The late nights when she fell asleep with her phone buzzing on the nightstand. The mornings when she left her bag unzipped. The tiny cracks in her carefully built wall. One evening, while she showered, I saw her phone light up. A preview of a message flashed across the screen. Just a single line. Same room, same time. Can't wait. That was it. My stomach twisted, but my face stayed calm. When she came out of the bathroom, I was reading a book, acting like nothing had happened. But inside, I knew. This wasn't a fling, it was routine. Routine meant I could predict her. And prediction meant control. Over the next few weeks, I collected pieces like a detective working a case. A hotel receipt slipped into her purse. A photo she forgot to delete from a shared folder. A voicemail where she giggled like a teenager at something he said. Each clue stacked neatly in my mind, building a file I didn't need to show anyone. Yet, the hardest part wasn't finding evidence. It was pretending I didn't know. Sitting across from her at dinner, nodding as she told me about demanding clients, while I could practically hear his voice on her phone in my pocket. My chest burned, my jaw clenched, but my words stayed steady. That mask I wore, it was my shield. And the longer I wore it, the stronger my revenge became. Sometimes, late at night, I questioned myself. Was I going too far? Should I just walk away quietly, file for divorce, and save myself the pain? But then I'd remember the messages. Her laughing at me. Her telling him I was boring and safe. That wasn't just cheating. That was humiliation. She wanted me small, invisible. And if she thought she could erase me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The turning point came when she told me she had a conference out of town. She packed a suitcase with more makeup than documents and left with a bright smile. The second the door closed, I opened my laptop and checked the reservation she had carelessly saved on her email. Riverstone Plaza. Same hotel. Same man. Same lies. I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart wasn't racing anymore. There was no panic, no fresh sting. Only clarity. She wasn't stopping. She wasn't going to confess. She thought she was untouchable. And that's when the idea fully formed in my head. If she wanted to live two lives, I was going to end both of them in one night. This wasn't about catching her anymore. This was about exposing her. Making sure every mask she wore slipped at the exact same moment. She thought she was clever, but she forgot. Technology leaves footprints. And I was the one tracking every single step. So I kept smiling. I kept cooking dinners. I kept being Anthony, the quiet IT guy. All while I gathered the last pieces of her double life. She thought she was playing a game. She didn't realize she was already trapped inside mine. By the time Claire's conference trip ended, I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was certain. She walked through the front door with that tired but glowing look, the one she used to have when we were newly married. Only now, it wasn't for me. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for holding down the fort, and unpacked her bag in the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the clock, letting her lies float past me like smoke. I didn't need to chase the smoke anymore. I already found the fire. And with that certainty came something colder than rage, clarity. I didn't want a messy argument in our living room. I didn't want neighbors whispering or lawyers piecing together our divorce in silence. No, I wanted the truth to explode. In front of the exact people who thought she was untouchable. That's when the plan took shape in my head. The place? Riverstone Plaza. The very hotel where she thought she could live her secret life. The audience? Her colleagues, partners, the same people she tried so hard to impress. The timing? Their upcoming corporate celebration, a night designed for prestige, wine glasses, and carefully rehearsed speeches. And in the middle of all that, her mask would fall. That I didn't rush to set it in motion. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, weighing every angle. Was I going too far? Was public exposure too cruel? The questions spun in my head, but every time doubt crept in, I remembered her voice in those messages. He's harmless. Just boring. That wasn't a slip. That was who she believed I was. And I wasn't going to let that version of me be the last word. I made calls. I rented a conference hall inside Riverstone Plaza, pretending it was for a tech demonstration. The staff didn't care. They were used to companies booking space for presentations. I paid in cash to keep it quiet. Then I started shaping the content. I wasn't going to scream accusations. I wasn't going to narrate her betrayal. I was going to let the evidence speak. The receipts, the emails, the blurry photos of her boss walking into hotel rooms, and the sound clips where they mocked me behind my back. I arranged them like a slideshow, a story that built itself, frame by frame. But here's the thing. It wasn't about humiliating her in private. If I only showed her the evidence at home, she'd deny, twist it, maybe even cry her way back into control. No, I needed witnesses. I needed the exact same crowd she performed for. The colleagues who saw her as this polished, ambitious star, to see who she really was when the lights dimmed. One night, as she slept beside me, I stared at her face. Peaceful, relaxed, as if she hadn't destroyed everything we had. My heart twisted, but not with love, with finality. She thought she was safe, that she could juggle both lives forever. She had no idea that her stage was already being built beneath her feet. Every detail mattered. Timing the projector, making sure the audio files were clear, choosing the most undeniable images, ones that couldn't be brushed off as misunderstandings. I spent hours fine-tuning, almost like I was preparing a work presentation. Except this wasn't about sales numbers or quarterly reports. This was about truth. Cold, undeniable truth. There were nights I almost told someone, a friend, a colleague, just to unload the weight. But I kept it locked inside. I knew that if word leaked early, she'd find a way to spin it, or her boss would use his influence to bury me. Silence, once again, was my weapon. When the invitation for her company's big celebration appeared on our fridge, a fancy flyer with gold lettering, I almost laughed. She circled the date in red, humming as she wrote it into her calendar. She had no idea she was circling her own downfall. And as the night drew closer, I felt less like a victim and more like an architect. Every move I made was deliberate, every detail sharpened. For once, I wasn't the quiet IT guy in the corner. I was the man holding the switch that would bring her world crashing down, that I didn't know exactly how people would react. Shock, anger, disbelief. But I knew one thing for certain. Once the screen lit up, there'd be no going back for Claire. And that thought kept me steady, because revenge isn't about shouting. It isn't about fists or broken plates. It's about timing. And I was about to give her the performance of her life, on the very stage she thought belonged to her. The days leading up to the corporate celebration were some of the longest of my life. Every minute felt heavy, stretched thin between anticipation and dread. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was afraid of myself. Afraid of what I was about to unleash, and how far it might go once I pressed play. Claire, on the other hand, was glowing. She spent hours choosing her dress, trying on different heels in front of the mirror, practicing smiles that looked effortless but calculated. I watched from the doorway, nodding, pretending to admire her. Inside, I was memorizing her every move, knowing these would be the last moments she thought she was in control. The contrast between us couldn't have been sharper. She thought the big night was hers. I knew it was mine. I worked late at night, long after she drifted off to sleep. My laptop's glow was the only light in the room, the quiet hum of the fan mixing with her steady breathing. On the screen, slide after slide unfolded. Receipts, emails, GPS logs, timestamps, pictures snapped without their knowledge. Each piece arranged not chaotically, but in a deliberate order that I wanted the story to build. Not just evidence tossed at the screen, but a narrative. The check-in receipts first, then the photos of them entering the same hotel, weeks apart, but always together. After that, the voice recordings, her laughter, his whispers, their little jokes about me being invisible. The presentation would end with the most undeniable proof. A clear image of them in the hotel lobby, her hand hooked around his arm, both of them smiling like they owned the world. I tested the audio again and again, adjusting the levels so every word was clear. I wanted the audience to feel it, to hear exactly how little respect she had for me. Not in a graphic way, just the raw betrayal, the mockery, the cruelty of words spoken when she thought no one else was listening. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I'd pause, staring at the screen, asking myself, Am I really about to do this? Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut, wake her up, and scream until the walls shook. But I knew that wouldn't satisfy me. That wouldn't erase the humiliation. If I confronted her privately, she'd twist it, spin it, maybe even cry until I caved. No, her lies thrived in the shadows. The only way to kill them was in the light. I booked the projector, double-checked the connections, even tested the HDMI cables 3 times just to be sure. I rehearsed in my mind how the night would play out, not my words, because I didn't plan to speak, but my silence. I pictured myself standing in the back of the room, calm, collected, while the screen told the story for me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My entire marriage had been about her voice, her spotlight, her charm. And now, her downfall would happen while I stood in silence. The morning of the event, Claire woke up early, buzzing with excitement. She kissed me quickly before leaving for work, chattering about how big this night was for her company. I smiled and told her she'd do great. She didn't notice the way I held her gaze a second too long. If she had, maybe she would have asked questions. But she didn't. She was too wrapped up in herself. As the hours ticked by, I felt strangely calm. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My chest wasn't tight. I'd already lived through the worst. The discovery, the evidence, the lies. What was left now was execution. I dressed plainly, nothing flashy. Just a shirt, dark jacket, the kind of outfit no one would remember afterward. Because I didn't want their eyes on me. I wanted every eye fixed on that glowing screen. Driving to the hotel, I passed familiar streets, restaurants we used to visit, places where I once thought our marriage had meaning. They felt like ghosts now, memories I had no use for. The Riverstone Plaza rose in the distance, tall and polished, the perfect stage for the truth. I parked, walked through the lobby, and greeted the staff like any guest. My reservation was already in place. The equipment was ready. All I had to do was wait. The strange thing about revenge is that it doesn't come with fireworks or music. It's quiet, steady, like the slow turn of a lock. And that's what I felt as I stood in that empty conference hall, checking the screen one last time. Everything was in place. All that was left now was to let the audience arrive, to let the night play out exactly as Claire thought it would, until it didn't, because the truth wasn't just going to whisper tonight. It was going to roar. The night of the celebration arrived, and the Riverstone Plaza gleamed like it had been built for this exact moment. The marble floors, the chandeliers, the clinking of wine glasses. It was the kind of place where reputations were polished and deals were sealed. To everyone else, it was just another corporate party. To me, it was a stage. I arrived early, not as a guest, but as the man behind the curtain. My setup was simple. The projector was tested, the presentation cued, the remote in my pocket. I walked the empty conference room one last time, checking angles, making sure the screen glowed bright and clear. Then I slipped into the background, blending with the staff and early arrivals, just another face no one would remember. Claire arrived later, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She glided into the lobby wearing a dress that sparkled under the lights, her hair styled like she was walking onto a red carpet. People greeted her with handshakes and smiles, her laughter echoing above the hum of conversation. She thrived in this environment. Attention, admiration, the illusion of power. From the corner, I watched. Not with jealousy, not with longing, with a calmness that surprised me. She thought this was her night. She had no idea it was mine. Her boss showed up not long after, his suit sharp, his grin even sharper. He placed a hand on Claire's back, subtle but possessive, the kind of gesture that meant nothing to outsiders but screamed everything to me. I almost laughed. They were bold enough to flirt in plain sight, believing no one else noticed. But I noticed. I always noticed. The party unfolded like any other corporate event. Waiters passed trays of appetizers. The band played soft music in the background, and clusters of executives swapped stories about clients and profits. On the surface, it was polished perfection. Underneath, it was a powder keg waiting for me to light the fuse. I wandered the edges of the room, invisible, listening to fragments of conversation. Claire's name came up often. How impressive she was, how valuable to the company. Her boss bragged about her dedication, how she went above and beyond. The hypocrisy nearly choked me, but I stayed silent, sipping wine, letting their praise stack higher and higher. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall. At one point, Claire spotted me across the room. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised to see me there. She walked over, her smile fixed, her tone casual. "Anthony, I didn't know you were coming tonight," she said, voice lilting as though she were performing. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied calmly. "Big night for you." For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Was it nerves? Suspicion? Maybe just the shock of me stepping into her carefully separated worlds. But she recovered quickly, introducing me to colleagues, laughing a little too loudly, as if to show she had nothing to hide. But I wasn't there to socialize. I was there to wait. As the evening moved toward its peak, the crowd gathered in the main hall. Lights dimmed, the projector warmed, and everyone settled in for what they thought was a standard company presentation. Claire and her boss took seats in the front row, confident, smiling, ready to show off their achievements. I stood in the back, the remote in my pocket, my hand steady. Around me, people whispered about promotions, new contracts, the future of the firm. None of them realized the future was about to be rewritten in a single click. The host took the stage, welcoming everyone, thanking the staff, making light jokes that earned polite laughter. The room buzzed with expectation. This was the highlight of their year, the kind of event people photographed and posted online to show off their success. And me? I was the ghost in the machine, silent, unnoticed, waiting for the perfect second. I remember looking at Claire one last time before it began. She leaned toward her boss, whispering something that made him smirk. They looked so secure, so untouchable. I almost smiled. Because in just a few minutes, that security would vanish. Everything was in place. The lights, the screen, the files lined up in perfect order. All I had to do was press the button. And as the applause for the opening speech faded, my thumb brushed against the remote. The truth was ready. The stage was set, and the show was about to begin. The applause faded, the lights dimmed, and the screen at the front of the room glowed white. The crowd shifted in their seats, expecting charts, graphs, maybe a slideshow about company growth. They had no idea what was coming. I stood in the back, remote in my hand, my heart pounding steadily. Not fast, not panicked, but like a drumbeat leading to war. I took a breath, pressed the button, and the first slide appeared. At first, it seemed harmless. A hotel receipt, Riverstone Plaza. Claire's name, her boss's signature, the date stamped clearly in black and white. A few people frowned, confused. They whispered, maybe thinking it was some kind of corporate joke. Then came the next slide. Another receipt. Different date. Same hotel. Same names. The room grew quieter, the whispers sharper. Claire sat frozen, her smile stiff, glancing nervously at her boss. He shifted in his chair, tugging at his collar. Slide 3. A photo. Grainy, but clear enough. Claire and her boss entering the hotel lobby together, her hand brushing against his arm. His eyes darting around the room like a guilty teenager sneaking into a bar. The silence in the hall thickened. No one was laughing anymore. The fourth slide hit harder. A series of text messages. Simple lines, projected huge on the screen. Same room, same time. Last night was perfect. He'll never know. Gasps rippled through the audience. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for the whole room to hear. Claire's boss shot up from his seat, his face flushed red. "This is a mistake," he shouted, but his voice cracked. The room didn't believe him, not with the evidence glowing above his head. I pressed the button again. A short audio clip filled the hall. Claire's laugh, light and unmistakable. Her voice saying words that stabbed me when I first heard them. "Anthony's harmless. He's just boring. He'd never figure it out." The room went dead silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Every eye turned toward Claire, who sat pale, trembling, her perfect facade cracking. Her boss grabbed her arm, hissing something I couldn't hear, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. People weren't just watching a scandal unfold. They were watching reputations implode in real time. I kept pressing the remote, each slide stacking on the last like bricks in a wall she couldn't climb over. Emails. More photos. Timestamps. It was undeniable. Airtight. What struck me most wasn't the evidence itself. It was the reactions. Executives whispering to each other. Faces hardening. Their polished smiles gone. Partners shaking their heads. Some already pulling out phones, recording the spectacle. The laughter and clinking glasses from earlier were replaced by stunned silence. and the occasional sharp intake of breath. And me? I stood in the back, sipping my wine, invisible but in control. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The screen spoke louder than anything I could have shouted. Claire finally stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "Stop this," she cried, her voice breaking. She turned toward the back, searching the room, and our eyes met. For the first time, she saw me. Not the quiet IT guy, not the man she mocked, but the one holding the strings. Her boss tried to recover, raising his hands, saying, "This is fake. It's doctored." But the room wasn't buying it. Not with receipts. Not with timestamps. Not with her own voice projected for everyone to hear. I pressed play one last time. The final image appeared, Claire and her boss in the hotel lobby, smiling, arm in arm. High definition. Clear. Unmistakable. The silence after that was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged for someone to speak. It was the kind that crushed. The kind that meant everyone had already made up their minds. Claire's world collapsed in that moment. Her colleagues' eyes weren't filled with admiration anymore, but with judgment. Her boss's reputation crumbled right there in his expensive suit. And me? I set the remote down on the table, calm, collected, like a man who had just closed a deal. The show had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The final image lingered on the screen, glowing above the crowd like a spotlight no one could escape. Claire stood frozen, her face drained of color, while her boss shifted uneasily in his chair, tugging at his tie like it had suddenly become a noose. Then, the whispers began. Low at first, a murmur of disbelief that spread like wildfire. Is this real? How long has this been going on? Wasn't that the same weekend as the client retreat? Every voice added weight to the silence between them, crushing the last fragments of their carefully crafted image. But Claire's boss snapped first. He shot up from his chair and pointed toward the screen. "This is an invasion of privacy. These are lies, fabrications." His voice echoed through the hall, desperate, but the room didn't buy it. His colleagues, his partners, they weren't looking at me, they were looking at him. And in their eyes, I saw something shift, trust dissolving into suspicion, respect curdling into contempt. Claire stumbled after him, her heels clattering against the polished floor. "Anthony, please," she cried, her voice trembling. "Turn it off. We can explain. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the screen do the talking." Another audio clip played, timed perfectly. Her voice again, light and cruel. "He's so predictable. He'll never even notice." A gasp cut through the hall, followed by a sharp laugh from somewhere in the back. Not a laugh of humor, but of disbelief. The kind of sound people make when they realize the mask has completely fallen off. Claire spun around, facing the crowd. "It's not what it looks like. It's complicated." Her hands fluttered in the air, as though she could wave away the evidence. But the more she spoke, the less anyone believed her. Her boss tried to grab control, raising his hands like a conductor silencing an orchestra. "This is being taken out of context. We're professionals. This is a smear campaign." But even as he said it, his voice cracked, and the room erupted. Some executives stood, arms crossed, their expressions hard. Others whispered furiously, pulling out phones, recording the chaos. The careful corporate order of the evening dissolved into a storm of judgment. Claire turned toward me again, her eyes wide, pleading. "Anthony, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. We can fix it." For the first time that night, I let myself smile. Just a small, quiet curve of the lips. Not cruel, not triumphant, simply final. Because there was nothing to fix, her boss lunged toward the projector, as if he could physically stop the truth. Two staff members intercepted him, confused but firm, pulling him back. His polished image was gone. He looked like a man caught in a trap, sweating, red-faced, furious, powerless. Claire, meanwhile, broke. Her voice cracked into sobs, her body trembling as she tried to explain, defend, deny, all at once. But no one was listening. Her words evaporated into the air, swallowed by the weight of evidence towering over her. From the back of the room, I watched it all unfold. The once proud executives, their polished smiles gone, stared at her with disgust. The clients, the colleagues, people she worked so hard to impress, now whispered like vultures circling their prey. And me, I was calm, silent. I didn't need to scream or shout. I didn't need to humiliate her with my voice. She had done that to herself. When the slideshow ended, the screen faded to black, leaving only the stunned faces of 200 people. No applause, no music, no polite chatter. Just silence, thick and heavy. Claire collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Her boss stood stiff, jaw clenched, as if trying to hold onto the last scraps of authority. But authority doesn't survive when the truth stands taller than you. I set down my empty glass, adjusted my jacket, and turned toward the exit. I didn't need to stay for the aftermath. I didn't need to hear the whispers turn into accusations, or the board members quietly planning his resignation. My job was done. As I walked out, I caught one last glimpse of Claire. She looked up, her eyes red, meeting mine across the room. There was no anger in her gaze, no defense left. Just fear. Fear of the life unraveling in front of her. And for the first time in months, I felt lighter. The storm had broken. And I was the one who had pulled the trigger. The night of the presentation ended like a storm tearing through glass. Sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. By the time I stepped into the cool night air outside Riverstone Plaza, I could still feel the electricity buzzing in my veins. Behind me, the celebration had turned into a disaster, and the cracks in their polished empire were already spreading. That I didn't stay to watch the final collapse, but word traveled fast. By the next morning, the fallout had begun. Claire's company was in chaos. Executives whispered about betrayal, about scandal, about how deep the rot went. Her boss, Mr. Perfect Suit and Tie, spent the morning trying to hold his ground. But the board wasn't interested in excuses. With clients already calling, furious and humiliated, he was cornered. Within 48 hours, he was resigning for personal reasons. Everyone knew what that meant. Claire, meanwhile, had become radioactive. She didn't just lose her boss. She lost the allies who once praised her, the colleagues who used to admire her drive. No one wanted to be seen next to her. In a world built on image and connections, she suddenly had neither. The stories trickled out in whispers, and I caught pieces from friends in the industry. "They're done," one colleague said. "She's toxic now. Can't even walk into the office without people staring." Another told me she broke down during a meeting, trying to explain it away as a mistake and taken out of context. But context didn't matter anymore. The evidence had burned itself into people's minds. Back at home, the silence between us was louder than ever. Claire avoided me, shuffling from room to room like a ghost. Her phone, once buzzing constantly, now sat quiet on the counter. The friends she used to text, the colleagues she used to brag about, all gone. One evening, she tried to talk. She stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she gripped a mug of coffee. "Anthony," she whispered, her voice thin. "We can fix this. Please. I'll quit the job. I'll make it right." I looked at her for a long time, studying the woman I once thought I knew. Her perfect composure was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the world had crushed her down. "There's nothing to fix," I finally said. My voice was calm, steady, the same way it had been the night I pressed play. "You did this. Not me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. I'd given her trust, loyalty, years of my life. And she'd traded it all for a secret life in hotel rooms. My silence had been her undoing. The fallout spread beyond her career. Mutual friends started pulling away. Invitations dried up. Even family members avoided the awkwardness of choosing sides. Claire went from being the center of every room to being the subject of every whisper. And me? For the first time in years, I felt free. The house was quiet. Yes, but it was a peaceful quiet. No more late nights waiting for her to come home. No more wondering who she was texting under the table. No more pretending not to notice that I filed for divorce the following week. The process was faster than I expected. She didn't fight. Maybe she knew she had no ground left to stand on. Maybe she was too exhausted from the fallout. Either way, when the papers were signed, I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd ever felt. People asked me later if I regretted it, if I thought I went too far. My answer was always the same. She built the stage. I just turned on the lights. And while Claire's world crumbled, I began rebuilding mine. Quietly, patiently, the same way I'd planned my revenge. But here's the thing about storms. Sometimes the wreckage spreads farther than you expect. Because what happened that night at Riverstone Plaza wasn't finished. The story wasn't just mine anymore. It was about to go public. that I thought the fallout would stay contained inside her company. I imagined whispers in boardrooms, quiet firings, and maybe a bruised reputation in professional circles. But I underestimated something big. Once truth is out, it doesn't stay locked in a single room. 2 weeks after the Riverstone Plaza presentation, I woke up to a message from a friend. Just 2 words, "It's online." I opened the link, and there it was, my entire slideshow, ripped straight from that night. Someone at the event had recorded it, and now it was circulating on forums, social media, even TikTok. At first, it was just the corporate world buzzing, but within hours, it snowballed into something bigger: memes, parodies, reaction videos, strangers dubbing over Claire's voice with cartoon characters, mocking the way she called me boring, screenshots of her boss looking like a deer in headlights, paired with captions like, "When you realize your career is over mid-presentation." It was brutal and unstoppable. I watched as views climbed by the thousands, then millions. People I'd never met were dissecting my marriage like it was a reality show. Some called me a hero, others debated whether revenge had gone too far. But no one, absolutely no one, had sympathy for Claire or her boss. Her name trended online for days. Not in a glamorous way, not like an influencer or a celebrity. No, she became a cautionary tale, a living example of betrayal turned inside out. Strangers picked apart her outfits, her fake smiles and old photos, her perfect Instagram captions. Everything she had carefully curated became ammunition against her. And her boss? His resignation went public almost immediately. The company released a sterile statement about upholding professional standards, but the internet wasn't buying it. Screenshots of his face from my presentation became viral reaction images. He went from respected executive to a walking punchline overnight. At home, Claire unraveled. She barely left the house. When she did, she wore sunglasses and a scarf like she was hiding from paparazzi. But it wasn't paparazzi, it was neighbors. People in the grocery store. Whispers behind her back. She'd scroll through her phone, trembling, reading cruel comments out loud. They made her into a meme, Anthony. Do you get that? A meme. I didn't respond. Because yes, I got it. More than that, I planned for exposure, but I never imagined it would go this far. One night, she broke down completely. Sitting on the floor of our living room, she sobbed into her hands. I can't escape it. It's everywhere. My life is ruined. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. For a brief second, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered every lie, every mocking word she'd whispered into her phone, thinking I'd never know. And the pity evaporated. The internet had done what I couldn't. It made her betrayal permanent. Not just in memory, but in digital history. Something she couldn't spin, couldn't erase, couldn't bury. As the days turned into weeks, I started noticing something else. My own name wasn't trending, but the story of the quiet husband who exposed everything became legend in certain corners of the internet. People romanticized it, debated it, even admired it. I'd walk into town and catch strangers giving me knowing looks, whispers of "that's him." It was surreal. My revenge had started as something private, then exploded into something global. Claire wasn't just losing her career and reputation anymore. She was losing her identity. But with the chaos came clarity. Watching her shrink under the weight of the internet's judgment, I realized the war was over. I had won. And it wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying the shame. She was. And unlike me, she couldn't hide from it. The world had seen the truth. And now, so had she. When the dust finally settled, my life looked nothing like it had a year earlier. The divorce went through quietly, faster than either of us expected. Claire didn't contest it. Maybe she couldn't. She walked away with little more than a suitcase of clothes and the crushing weight of her own reputation. I walked away with the house, the car, and, most importantly, my freedom. It wasn't just about material things. It was about the peace I hadn't felt in years. No more waiting up at night for her to come home. No more lies sitting in the air between us like smoke. Just silence, the good kind. The kind that lets you breathe. Claire disappeared from the corporate world completely. Last I heard, she was working temporary jobs, trying to stay out of the public eye. Every once in a while, I'd catch her name in some online thread, someone posting a screenshot from that night with a new caption. Her scandal had burned itself into internet culture, and there was no escaping it. her boss fared no better. After his resignation, he tried consulting privately, but the internet doesn't forget. Clients backed away, unwilling to risk their own reputations by being associated with him. In the end, he faded into the background too, just another fallen figure chewed up by his own arrogance. And me? I began to rebuild. I poured myself into my work, but not just behind a desk anymore. I started networking, speaking at local events, even teaching young tech students. People listened to me now, not because I was loud, but because I was steady, calm. The guy who had pulled off something unthinkable without raising his voice. That I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, started traveling a little, seeing parts of the world I'd always told myself I was too busy to visit. For the first time, my life wasn't about surviving someone else's expectations. It was about living on my own terms. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I regret the way I exposed her so publicly. And my answer is always the same. No, because she didn't just cheat. She erased my dignity, laughed behind my back, and thought I'd never notice. She built the stage herself. All I did was turn on the lights. But I'll be honest, revenge isn't pure victory. It's complicated. Yes, I won. Yes, I walked away stronger. But there's a part of me that knows I'll always carry the scar of what she did. The difference now is that scar doesn't define me. It reminds me of what I overcame. And here I am, standing taller than I ever did, living free, rebuilding not just my life, but myself. So I'll leave you with this. Did I do the right thing? Was exposing her publicly the justice she deserved? Or did I go too far? What would you have done if you were in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and tell me, was I right? Or was there another path I should have taken? Because sometimes, the best stories aren't just told. They're judged.